Hey, what's up everybody, Justin here, and this week I'm going to make a review of not a J-drama, but an anime. And I remember when I was doing anime reviews when I first started doing YouTube back in 2007, and one anime I never really got around to watching until a couple of years ago is the cult classic Legend of the Galactic Heroes. I will be reviewing the original OVA series, which was released between from 88 to 97, and I'll just say the remake, the new thesis. I don't know how to speak Nazi, sorry about that, for another time. So yes, I finally got around. It was like on my radar for over 10 years. It's just like I just didn't really have the chance to get into it until I had the chance. And by the time that I had the chance to watch it, I wasn't really actively reviewing anime that much anymore. But now that I'm getting back into it, I think this would be a good time as any to talk about my thoughts on it and give a summary and whatnot. So it just pretty much takes place in the far distant future, and for the past century or so, the Free Planets Alliance and the Galactic Empire have been at war. So, classic scenario, classic sci-fi, you hear Free Planets Alliance, you hear Galactic Empire, you immediately assume the Free Planets are the good guys and the Galactic Empire are the bad guys. And yes, it's pretty reasonable to make those conclusions, and based on that synopsis. But when you really get to watch it, when you get really the full nuance, that's really, nothing could be further from the truth. So what if I were to tell you that on both sides there are good guys and bad guys? And in the series, eventually through one of the co-main leaders, young Wenley talks about how wars can be sometimes fought between one good against another good, not simply against good and good versus evil. But there are some exceptions to that rule. But in this case, this is definitely a good versus good and evil versus evil. Both the conflicts within, not just between each other, but within these factions as well. So through the Free Planets Alliance, you're getting the central focus character is one of their top generals, young Wenley. So he's just pretty much a humble guy who loves his tea, and he just joins the military because when he joined the academy, he's like, okay, free education. And he also gets a good retirement plan just by joining the military. He never really joined out of like any patriotic duty or anything like that. And the reason why he kind of becomes a top strategist is because he's a history buff. And through his study of history, in particular the study of battles, it's like, okay, this is what happens, and this is like what they try to do, and this is how they pull it off. And when he encounters a scenario akin to what he studies, he's like, okay, this reminds me of this particular battle, and this is what happened, and this is what I can do, or this is how I can counter it. And because of this particular knowledge and his hobby, he kind of pretty much uses his hobby or his devotion to history as like his main weapon. And as a general, it's relatively made him undefeated. And of course, because of his accomplishments, it's made him a really popular, with the people. I mean, he's still relatively young. The people like him, his soldiers are loyal to him. And the thing is, the politicians, who are ironically Democratic elected, do feel threatened by him. And it's like, hey, because he's not afraid to, let's say, challenge their authority as well. It's like, take for example, even within their own internal walls, people do, let's say, still protest against the war, especially one of his best friends after, or the fiance or the wife of one of his best friends dies in battle. She's like, hey, we should have no more war. And unfortunately, she gets hurt during the protest. And it's like, hey, these protesters are unpatriotic. And he's like, hey, we're fighting for their speech to do that. And because he challenges their authority in this particular way, the government does feel threatened by him and do what they can to, let's say, limit him. And on the Empire side, the main focal character is, Reinhardt. So he was born of low nobility, even though he kind of like, came from upper middle class or whatever. He just wasn't really that high class. he kind of considers himself low class because when he was a child, the emperor pretty much bought his sister as a concubine, and when him and his best friend Kirkei saw that, hey, as people were being killed in war, they saw the nobles just, celebrating with all these lavish parties, like, hey, people are dying, and the nobles are having all these parties without a care in the world, and it's like, and there are people in the streets on these planets that are suffering, so we're gonna go through the military, rise to the ranks, and take over the government, and make the galaxy a better place through their own dictatorship, benevolent dictatorship. So what's interesting is, like, through the, let's say, the viewpoint of Reinhard, you kind of do see like how monarchy / dictatorships can, I wouldn't say have their advantages, but like with the right person in charge, you kind of see like, hey, maybe this can be used in a very positive force. And this is, addressed within the series as well. It's like young Wenli even sees like, hey, Reinhard does have good intentions. And he's like, hey, if he were born under the Empire, for example, young Willie does it, and he's like, hey, if I were born in the Empire, I would have no qualms serving under Reinhard. But he also sees it's like, okay, democracy may not be perfect, but at the end of the day, the power still belongs to the people, and that's kind of what he values. But he also does see like, hey, Reinhard, he does have noble intentions, and he actually does support him in his own ways, but at the end of the day, he feels like, hey, when the next person comes along, who's to say that they're going to have, the best interest of the people in mind. So this is kind of really interesting that they, address these particular viewpoints. But of course, in the case of Reinhard, he was born and raised in this kind of system, so he can't exactly, imagine anything else. It's like, if anyone has to get it done, it has to be one person, and all that other stuff. And of course, it does have a really strong supporting cast. Like in the case of Reinhard, you have his best friend. I'm not sure how you pronounce this, but in the Japanese version, it's like Kirkei. So it's his childhood best friend, and you kind of really do. It does a really good job of showing of how much like he's like a very excellent support system, not just to him, personally, but of course in politics and military matters as well. And then, eventually expands to his other generals like Mittermeier, and Ruthenthal, and all these other characters. And of course, this also expands, let's say, young Wenli's supporting cast, like his ward, Julian. At first, he just, treats him like as a surrogate son, but eventually becomes a protege to eventually, let's say, become his eventual replacement. Even though he kind of doesn't want him in that life, but he kind of understands like, hey, it's his life to choose, and he understands like why he inspires him. So yes, it's very a unique story. It's not like your traditional good versus evil, as I said before. It's like a very unique, one of a kind space opera that you don't see anywhere else for the most part. And that's what really drew me in. It's like there are no one side or the other. It's not more good or evil. It's the people who matter, and you do see there are good people on one side and bad people on the other. And so at the end of the day, you're really cheering for these individuals, not for these factions to like succeed. So also the music, it uses a lot of classical music since they're pretty much in the public domain, so they're kind of free to, let's say, use like whatever classical music one, whether it be Beethoven, Mozart, Bach, whoever it is, you're likely to hear it. But of course, the opening and ending theme songs, they will use songs that are in English and whatnot. So I thought that was pretty interesting as well. And of course, the character designs, they are very unique to the 80s and 90s aesthetic. The uniforms are pretty, very definitive to what the culture of these particular factions are. With the Free Planets Alliance, you're kind of getting something more loose, while with the Galactic Empire, you're getting something more regal. And of course, you see that with like the ship's designs as well, and everything else. So of course, when it comes to how computer graphics are displayed, like holograms, it feels like you're still watching Atari. So that kind of didn't exactly date well. And of course, data is still stored on 5-inch floppy disks. So that's, some remnants of, let's say, the technology of the time are being portrayed in this anime. But of course, when we get around to talking about the newer versions, of course, the technology as it pertains to that is very appropriately updated for a modern audience. And yeah, I don't know if I know it's now released in the English speaking world, but I'm not sure if there's a dub. But I watched it in raw Japanese, and pretty much like every big name voice actor, seiyuu, like between this, who was active from the beginning till then, have all played some sort of role. Like take for example, what was his name? Ryo Horikawa, the voice of, who's most famous, the voice of, let's say, Vegeta from DBZ, and Shun from Saint Seiya. He's the voice of Reinhardt. And you kind of do see that, bit of Vegeta in his performance, but, he can, speak more softly with his tone. He can speak roughly, but not to the point that Vegeta does in DBZ. Like, he will always have that authority, but also have not really that rough. And Young Wenli, he's played by, what was his name? I'm trying to remember the name off the top of my head. Like, he was considered the Mel Blanc of Japan. Let me look it up. Sorry, I have my iPad on me and I know he kind of died not too long ago. And they kind of changed. Kei Tomiyama, yeah, that's him. Like, he was considered the Mel Blanc of Japan, and he died in 1995 at the relatively, at least the Japanese standards, young age of 56. I think he had cancer. And not only was he also famous as the voice of, let's say, Young Wenli, he was also featured, let's say, let me look up what I'm trying to remember what he did at the top of my head. He was actually Naoto Date in the original Tiger Mask anime. So he did that voice. He was also, what was his name? Oh, he was Hikari in Ultraman. He was also in both Astro Boys versions, but in the 1981, he played Rainbow Parakeet. He was also, what was his name? Takashi in Kimagure Orange Road. So it was like, yeah, he did a lot of big names of his times. So yeah, rest in peace. And what was his name? Yulian, he's voiced by Nozomu Sasaki, most famous the voice of Tetsuo and Akira, and he was also Yusuke in Yu Yu Hakusho. And I know that the guy who voices Char's Noble, Shuichi Ikeda, he played one of the generals. I remember the name of the general off the top of my head. And I know that Norio Wakamoto, the voice of Cell from Dragon Ball Z, he was the voice of Ruenthal. And yeah, so pretty much you got a lot of big name voice actors in the Japanese entertainment anime industry in here. I can't really comment on any dubs whatsoever because I don't watch dubs. So yeah, so if you're looking for, if you're a lover of sci-fi, space opera, if you're looking for, let's say, the War and Peace of anime, or the War and Peace of sci-fi, or space opera, then Legend of the Galactic Heroes is it. Yes, I know there's a remake, being done. I have also been watching it. It still isn't done yet, but I still say the original series is worth watching, and I recommend that you watch it. Thank you.